industrializing any food system is not good. But if you looked at the best version of livestock management, and you look at the best version of horticulture or kind of tillage or arable, like livestock is only net positive, whereas there's always inputs in horticulture and in arable because it's done by humans. So there's human labor. Often then, especially with arable, it's going to be fossil fuels or some sort of mechanization, whereas the livestock can pretty much be done with no inputs when done well. And they're fertilizing as they go, and the amount of knock-on effects of animals for the wildlife is basically, it's a solution. It's a huge solution, and that's why I'm fascinated by it. And I was a vegetarian for 8 years. My main business here is vegetables. I'll always grow vegetables. I'm not, saying animals are right and veg is wrong. But actually, if you really start going down the rabbit hole of looking at all this, like grain is not something that is easy to do without mechanization. It's a lot of work if you're doing it without machines and using horses. And if you want to talk about plowing, that's obviously not good. And then you're trying to no-till, and then in this climate, that's tricky. So that's not, a solution as such.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The concept of the Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system, which keeps everything we need replenished as long as we all respect it and use wisely. So an understanding of how this system works, along with deep cooperation between humans and all life, is essential to keep us thriving and the spaceship flying. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with humans involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness, and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, activists, writers, designers, adventurers, healers, entrepreneurs, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of a more beautiful, life-sustaining world in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth.
Greetings, Earthling. This is Dan. Thank you for tuning in. Much appreciated. I'm recording this. Where are we? Tomorrow is the winter solstice here in the UK. So we're towards the back end of December. And yeah, it's actually been months since I've had a microphone in my hand. Life has got in the way of the podcast in the last few months, and that's just the way life goes. Sometimes we have no control. In fact, most of the time, I'm figuring out as I get older, we have no control whatsoever of anything. But anyway, it's been quiet on the recording front. I'm hoping this will change in the new year. But there is a little episode here, which I'm serving up, which was a conversation I actually recorded in June this year over on the west coast of Ireland with the marvellous legend that is Fergal Smith. Now, Fergal is a... How can I describe Fergal? Well, Fergal's known as many things. He's known as the surfer farmer. He's an extraordinary surfer, a big wave surfer who has been leading the charge on a lot of the big wave surfing on the west coast of Ireland. And over the years, probably about the last 10 years, I imagine, he has dropped his professional surfing lifestyle and become a farmer, a regenerative farmer, and he's on that journey. And it is a journey because I think it's a bit like becoming crew. It's an always on evolutionary process to be regenerative farming, as is with anything right now. I met Fergal at the Do Lectures, actually. I can't remember when it was. We were both speaking at it, and we were both sharing a tent. and we connected there, and we've stayed in touch. And I have ended up creating a little bit of a ritual in my family, in that each time one of my children reached the threshold of leaving primary school and moving into secondary school, I chucked them in the van, got a boat across the island, drove up the Wild Atlantic Way, went surfing, and camping in the van, and then ended up the week away at Moy Hill Farm, which is the farm where Fergal farms, and usually have spent a day and a night on the farm, catching up with Fergal and family and seeing how they've been evolving, what they're doing, mucking in where possible, and it's something I've done I've done it 3 times now. I have 3 children. So in June this year, I took my youngest, Willow, and we headed over to Ireland, and we had a fantastic few days up the Wild Atlantic Way. We had some brilliant surf and amazing times in the van, and we got to Moy Hill, I think, on quite a bleak day. We got to Moy Hill in sort of late afternoon. We spent an evening there, and then Fergal and I recorded this conversation quite late at night, actually. I think it was about 10 o'clock by the time we actually managed to sit down. This is the life of a farmer, in one of their barns, and there was a bit of a storm that night as well. There was a couple of power cuts as we were recording, so a lot of this was a conversation in the dark. But it's a fascinating conversation. Fergal's story of his kind of surf to farm evolution, is quite well documented. So you can find, if you're interested in hearing sort of Fergal's backstory, there are plenty of places to find that. Or I would particularly recommend going to Matt Barr's Looking Sideways for an episode with Fergal that gets that story. The time I had with Fergal, we just went straight into where he's at with Moy Hill at the moment. It's an evolutionary project. It's shifted quite a lot, even in the years that I've visited. And so we just locked into, like, what it's like to farm today for him there on that piece of land. So it's very focused on that plot. And Fergal, in some ways, at least my sense, is he is becoming part of that landscape. He is intimately in relationship with it, day in, day out, in quite a mind-blowing way. And I think that's what's so fascinating about Fergal, is he is in that place. That's where he's focusing on. He is, I would say, spending less time now sort of bothering himself with wider issues out of what he can influence, and he's just focusing into that place. And I think there's something really interesting in that right now, that I think maybe is something that many of us could take inspiration from. How do you just focus in on the places that you're in order to try and evolve that, to try and bring healing, care, beautiful change back to that place where you're at? And that obviously can be through whatever it is that you're able to offer into the world, whatever gift you're carrying. For Ferg, it's all about bringing that soil health back, bringing the biodiversity back, and exploring how he can feed people around him and his family as well. We talked a lot about animals, and it's interesting, when I last visited Ferg, there was, I don't think they had animals, but now he's got animals. And so, again, I think what I learned out of this conversation is the nuance, again, that's required at the moment when we talk about the state of the world, when we think about the changes that are needed in the world. Now, there's a lot going on around the role of industrial agriculture, animal agriculture, and how much it's destroying ecosystems. And I think at an industrial level, you can't argue with the evidence and that's out there. The industrial production of animals is off the scale horrific. It's causing total breakdown of so many delicate ecosystems. Just look at the stuff that with the rivers here in the UK. I think it's you can't really argue that stuff has to be phased out as fast as possible. And there's a lot in this that's very hard to have a kind of binary point of view on. But spending time with Fergal, actually, this conversation, he talks a lot about the animals that he is working with and their role in bringing soil health back, bringing biodiversity back, therefore bringing grasslands back, bringing the ability for those landscapes to sequester carbon. And again, as I learned a bit from chatting with Andy Cater at Wild Farmed about the role of cattle that they have in the production, you know, this idea of working with animals to bring the health of the ecosystem back, and then the meat coming out the back end is a byproduct of that process. It's a byproduct of restoring health of ecosystems. Now, of course, people say, well, yeah, but if we want to all eat meat like that, you're going to need this and that. I think that, you know, it's clear, like, we have to be eating way less meat, right? But maybe some places are more suited to eating meat and some places aren't. And this is the thing. What are the different places calling for? Some places are going to need animals to bring biodiversity back. Some places are going to be rewilded. Some places are going to need full-on food production. I mean, this is what we're up against. We're into a kind of whole world of complexity. And the places we're in are going to become more and more important. The nuance of the place. What are these places calling for? How do we apply that level of intelligence to those places? But, you know, the day after I recorded this, before we left to drive back across Ireland and get the boat back to England, Ferg said, come down the bottom meadow, come and see the animals. So me and Willow went down the bottom of the farm, down to these meadows. With Ferg, we walked into this meadow. The grass was about waist high. And he's like, well, the cattle are out there. And we couldn't actually see them because the grass was so long. We couldn't actually see them until he sort of coax them out, if you like. And Ferg pointed out that there's this whole thing, you know, about the way that he's trying to farm and the way that real regenerative farming is working. It's like, if you're bringing inputs, which is this idea of bringing stuff onto the farm from outside, so that's called inputs, whether that's fuels, whether that's energy, whether that's food, whether it's fertilizers, all kind of things. They're called inputs, stuff that you're having to bring from somewhere else and put them into that farm there. So he was saying, like, if you're bringing food for the cattle from somewhere else, if you're having to bring food on, you're failing. You're failing at regenerative farming. So the whole idea is the land should feed the animals themselves without you having to interfere. So this is kind of mind-blowing, really, when you think about it. And that's what he's trying to do. That's the whole aim of it, is so that the whole place sustains itself. And he pointed up onto the hill and he said, see up there, what do you see? And what I saw was these kind of fields with cattle like lying in these fields where there was barren of any kind of biodiversity, and then there was a big farm. There was farm machinery sort of lifting up these big bundles of hay and food that had been brought on. And he said that's industrial dairy farming, millions of quid's worth of kit, having to bring all this stuff onto the land, all these inputs, bringing feed stock from God knows where, grain that's been cultivated out of, on land to actually feed animals, to feed humans. All of it is failing. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's really important, I think, to stay open to the nuance that is required in everything in terms of how we feed ourselves, how do we bring health back to ecosystems. This idea of, no animals versus animals, this idea of, meat versus vegan, there's a lot of complexity. That's all I'm saying. A lot of complexity. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast, episode 62, with Fergal Smith from Moy Hill Farm. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Fergal, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast here on your very own Moy Hill Farm.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming to visit.
Thanks for having me. I know it's been quite a I've only been here a couple of hours, but it's been... Do you know what I was thinking? Since the last time I came, today, I've been in the ocean with you and your family. I've had dinner with you. Things that I have never done when I was been with you before, because you've always just been... I'm not saying you're not insanely busy, but something has shifted.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I wouldn't say I'm any less busy, but I think priorities maybe are a bit more aligned. Coming of age, getting old, basically. Yeah, like, I'm manic busy. That my wife definitely wouldn't say I've changed that. But it's very important, you know, having young kids, and yeah, you can we all know anyone who's a busy person can be busy until the day they die. So yeah, it's just very important to just carve out some time here and there to splash in the ocean, or do whatever your kids want to do, really.
Yeah, nice. So I was trying to figure out when we were with my youngest Willow as we were driving up here, and she said, "How do you know Fergal?" And I was trying to, and obviously this is the third time I've visited with my third child. There's a whole pattern here. Yeah. Next time I might come on my own, actually. And I was trying to remember, because I think it was about 8 years ago we met, but I was trying to remember the question that you were holding at that time, about because you'd had I think Moy Hill Community Garden was happening. I think that's when I met you. I think it was the second year you've been doing that or something.
Okay.
But you had this question, I remember, because when I came here the first time, I think you just acquired this land. I don't think you'd got onto it yet. And then when I came 4 years ago with Olive, you were a couple of years in. But you had this, I always remember you had this question about trying to figure out, how do you feed a community? How do you feed people locally with good, nutritious food, and do it in a way that is, bringing the natural world back from its how would I describe it? Well, the stresses and the strains that the natural world is under. So that was, I think, give or take a bit. But I seem to remember that was the sort of question that you were inquiring around.
Yeah, and I still wake up every morning asking that question myself. It's definitely front and center, and it hasn't shifted, and it's still my main focus every day is, I'm not working like a lunatic to make money. It's really trying to figure this out, and I will never figure it out, but I at least will give it a damn good try and work some bits out. And since the community garden, that was the kind of incubator start, and I knew it wasn't going to feed very many people at all, but it was just getting wheels in motion. And we're moving down the road and learning as we go, and it's evolving, and it's very interesting. I'm up at 5 a.m. tomorrow for it, because I love it, and no one has to drag me out of bed, because I'm just I'm fascinated by it, and I find it so interesting. I just wanted to be further ahead in the learning and the story, but it's just so interesting, and I love everything about it, really.
So I know, like, you've documented your evolution, your surf to farming story on other podcasts and stuff, and I don't want to go massively down that track, but I would love just a bit of context for some of the listeners.
Yeah,
because in some people's eyes, you've made quite an unusual. Wouldn't call it a pivot, because it's always been there in you, as you've said. But some people as people from the way we look at each other externally, and we see things. And so you were, and you still are, obviously, right up there. But that was, you were a professional surfer. Tell us, just give people a little bit of context about that shift.
Yeah, no, and it is a bit of a shell-shocking change for people to grasp, and myself at times, but no, not for me, but no. Even my family, who also run an organic farm, and they're just like, why are you giving up something that you love doing and you get paid to do? Like, that's pretty much the ultimate thing. And I'm like, it really is, and I've loved it, and it's great, but actually there is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like, we can chase it indefinitely and have a great time doing it, but it's, you can't grasp the end of chasing waves. It's just this endless kind of pursuit, which is amazing and it is great, but it definitely doesn't give you like a grounded sense of like fulfillment. It's more of a really big high and amazing moments. And I've no regrets of any of it. But yeah, because I grew up on a farm and have some kind of, ecological, insights and then concerns as I travel and see the world, I basically got to a point where it just hit me like a ton of bricks that I can't just keep going surfing, having a laugh and watch, the world degrade around me, and I'm actually causing more harm as I do it than helping anything. And I tried to be objective. I tried to actually sit down and go, what's the best thing I can do, in the scheme of things with my life here for the short time I have? Like, what is it? Is it going to Africa and helping in a charity? Or I really tried to not be going just copying my parents, basically. But actually, I was like, you know what? I know exactly what I need to do. And it was clear as day from that moment. I need to go home. I need to do this because I actually have a little bit of experience in it. I enjoy it, and it's crucially important. But the big difference was I wanted to do it more than just vegetables, which are very important. I wanted to have manage an ecosystem, manage the biodiversity of a landscape, and really was more interested in the whole mixed farm kind of approach. And that's the side of the farm that interests me the most, is managing a whole kind of tract of land.
Did how did that come to light? As I say, because you said your dad was organic veg.
Yeah,
you grew up with that around you. When you started like the community farm? Obviously, the community garden was like you say, it was a way to get going, a way to start bringing people around food and the land and whatever. When did you start to make these connections around this whole system idea? Because we can dig into this, but it feels like we're living in this time where either folks are sort of all out against animals, and obviously there's a pretty compelling case against, at least from what I can understand, against the sort of a world that's just producing tons of livestock and using vast tracts of land to feed those livestock. But of course, as we know, this stuff is nuanced and complex and all this stuff. But when for you was this sense of actually, I need to explore this animal, plant, land relationship?
Kind of like even from childhood, like I grew up on a vegetable farm, but I grew up with my neighbors chasing sheep and cows, and I used to love it. Like I used to love just being the sheepdog, basically. But I very clearly saw it not a very good system. Like, animals having the vet and they're getting dosed and, having maggots on the sheep. I could just see all these problems, and I just wondered why it was like that. But I always was still interested. And then coming around, later as a bit more of an adult, I wanted to learn about animals and how they interact, because basically the world evolved with animals on it. It didn't, evolve with just plants. Animals were here, before probably we were. And that's how soil was built. And I wanted to learn about all that. And I suppose I started learning about holistic management, which is from the Savory Institute, Alan Savory. And I did that kind of training, and that really kind of snowballed my understanding about land management. And we love to control things as humans, and horticulture is a real controlled environment. It's man-made. I decide to grow vegetables here, and it's great food and everything, but it's actually quite unnatural to see. You don't see a garden just happening in the wild. It's a man-made thing, and it's not actually, it wouldn't last very long if you walked away from it. Whereas, grass and livestock has been happening for thousands of years through predators moving animals around the globe, and that's been happening indefinitely, and that has always worked. And there can be no inputs in animals. So in a nutshell, animals, are, to me, kind of the solution to our problems. And done well, they are unbelievable what they can achieve. Done badly is which we're seeing in, most of our industrial agriculture is, that's why they're a problem. But it's certainly, what's the saying? It's not the cow, it's the how. And industrializing any food system is not good. But if you looked at the best version of livestock management, and you look at the best version of horticulture or kind of tillage or arable, like livestock is only net positive, whereas there's always inputs in horticulture and in arable because it's done by humans. So there's human labor. Often then, especially with arable, it's going to be fossil fuels or some sort of mechanization, whereas the livestock can pretty much be done with no inputs when done well. And they're fertilizing as they go. And the amount of knock-on effects of animals for the wildlife is basically, it's a solution. It's a huge solution. And that's why I'm fascinated by it. And I was a vegetarian for 8 years. My main business here is vegetables. I'll always grow vegetables. I'm not, saying animals are right and veg is wrong. But actually, if you really start going down the rabbit hole of looking at all this, like grain is not something that is easy to do without mechanization. It's a lot of work if you're doing it without machines and using horses. And if you want to talk about plowing, that's obviously not good. And then you're trying to no-till, and then in this climate, that's tricky. So that's not, a solution as such. It can be done very well. Same in horticulture, huge amount of inputs. But if you look into it, animals are quite sublime. Like they take, like sun grows grass, animals eat grass, they grow on that. No other, we can't live on grass, and they can fertilize the soil, and done well, like it's all about the management. So, giving a big field to a few cows is not a very good management, even though they've loads of grass. It's all about, naturally in the wild, there was huge herds of animals, there could be thousands with predators following them. And that's why they were in a herd, to protect each other. And the weak one and the old one and the young one got taken by the predators. And that's how it weeded out sick animals. And there was no vets keeping them alive, keeping weak animals alive like we do now. But the main thing is they kept being moved. They never stayed in one place. Whereas now we have private property and fences, and we can leave an animal in a field for a month, and they don't really have a choice. Whereas when there was no fences, they were just roaming, and there could have been 1,000. They reckon there could have been between 500 and 1,000 cows to an acre, but they were in there for maybe 2 hours, and then they mightn't come back for 3 months because they're going on some big long kind of migration, being pushed by predators. So that's obviously not going to happen in our modern era because we have private property and roads and all these things. But we can mimic that. We can mimic that same, bunch them close together, and it's basically using very inexpensive polywire, using electric fence, and you can keep them in a tight space, but we move them every day and sometimes twice a day, and you give them fresh grass every single day. They're super healthy. The land gets the impact it needs, and then the rest it needs, and everyone's winning, and it's great.
So what have you, like, with this here, because I remember when you first came to this bit of land, because give us some context, because it was farmland, but give us a bit of history of the land when you first...
So we were in the community garden, which is only half an acre, and then a 17 acre piece of land came up for sale, but like out of the 17 acres, I think there's 10 acres of just complete bog that we don't use really at all, and then there's about 3 or 4 acres, I don't even know my maths, but there's a little bit of half usable kind of graze land, and then there's like a 2 acre flat field that we chose to have the market garden. So essentially we just bought 17 acres for a market garden, and that's all there was, and that's all we could really use. And then a neighbouring farm came for sale, which is now another 50 acres, which is much more, better kind of grazing land. So, yeah, that's where we're at now.
And on that, like,
because I'm intrigued, because I'm really intrigued. I'm trying to understand this whole animal plant soil relationship. There's the scale thing, which I find problematic, or at least from my understanding of, you know, if we're putting vast amounts of livestock onto more and more land, and we're clearing more and more land to produce soy or whatever it is that we're being fed, and obviously that's bringing down ecosystems on one part of the planet, and of course that. So, like we said, it's complex, right? But what have you noticed about arriving on this land? And obviously, you've been doing huge amounts of work to try and understand it and make sense of it. But what have you noticed in terms of the life coming back, like the soil, the habitats, the biodiversity here? What have you seen while you've been here playing with this stuff? Because I think ultimately that's the thing, isn't it? You're the grounded experience that you have here. Yeah,
it's fascinating, and you know, the animals are the tool, and basically if you leave land and don't touch it, like into a rewilding state, it goes kind of scrubby. It goes into like, first of all, the grass grows and the grass gets full and then goes to seed. And then if it doesn't get eaten or trampled, it kind of starts going stale or tatchy or kind of rank and not palatable and kind of woody stems. And then you're going to get in like brambles, and then you're going to get like willows and, you know, thorny trees, and they're kind of your pioneer species coming in. And then you're going to have, you know, slightly bigger trees, and eventually you'll get an old forest. You know, and that's what land will go back to, and it always will. And that's lovely, and that's really nice, and it's great. But actually, like people might argue, but it's actually quite biodiversity low in some respects. You know, when it starts to just be a pile of brambles, you know, it's a bit of a habitat for certain birds, and you know, it's good in ways. But like a well-managed grassland, like grassland when it's kind of pumping, it's sequestering. Grass can sequester carbon 21 times faster than trees can, and it stores it in the soil, which is like putting it into like bars of gold. It's like putting into serious savings, because soil ain't moving and it's stable. So that's one thing. And then my thing is, if we can have trees alongside grassland, we're really killing it. You know, because we have trees which are great for birds and windbreaks and big roots going down, and also storing carbon and more biodiversity, more insects and all this stuff. But having the grass at the same time, there's just way more life. I can see it. I can't give you figures, but I can see from insects buzzing over the top of the grass, like there's just more stuff happening. It's like a fully humming forest is amazing as well, but that takes a long time to get there. You know, if we're looking at trying to change agriculture and food systems and manage ecosystems, a well-managed grassland with integrated trees, to me, is where it's at. Like that's the most dynamic kind of. Anywhere there's an edge, we're at the edge of a forest going onto a pasture, is where you get all the, you know, that's where you run away when the midges come out, because it's, you know, they're in the trees, and then you have the birds, and there's so much going on. Like, we don't want to see a monoculture of grass. Like, that would be my worst nightmare. But you break it up with loads of different tree lanes. So that's a lot of what we do. It's called agroforestry or silvopasture, is breaking fields up into lanes. So there's, you know, 20-meter lane of grass, and then there's a couple of rows of trees, and then grass, and then trees. And it's diversity. It's interesting. It's great for the animals. There's more feed for the animals. There's more shelter. There's more birds. There's just more leaf mold going onto the ground. And yeah, there's just so many benefits to both being there. Whereas just trees, as cool and as much as I love trees, it's kind of one-dimensional, and it's not reaching its full potential. And it's also, you know, like, there is livelihoods to be made out of forestry, but you're not feeding people, you know, next week out of a forest. And we're not feeding off perennials food enough, which could be how, you know, people can say we can feed ourselves with a lot of more perennial woody trees, but realistically, we're not living on perennials. people want annual veg and meat and eggs and milk and these kind of things. So yeah, if you're looking to keep people on the land, to manage the land, and to keep land in its best state, there needs to be livelihoods as well at the same time. And this is the complex stuff when you get into how do you make a wage out of the land while you're trying to heal it and store carbon. It's complex.
Massively complex. Yeah.
But to simplify it, I just think, on any farm, if you plant, a few rows of trees in on every hedgerow, if you break every field up into lanes, you will plant thousands and thousands and thousands of trees. And the fields can still all be used for the same enterprises or new enterprises, ideally. But yeah, you can have both. You don't have to have just trees. You don't have to have just grass. It's the diversity is key. And we know that in anything. We know that in our gut biome. We know that, just... Is it better to go to an all-girls school or an all-boys? I don't know. I just think diversity is good. It's healthy.
Yeah, it's kind of like nature knows best, doesn't it? On that, when there is diversity, everything seems to function.
There's another thing that people think that this for Ireland, for example, was all forest, and that's what it was, and it would have been a lot of trees in this country. But there would have been a wood pasture is what they kind of think of it now, what it would be called, which is kind of trees and then glades, and you would have had herds of animals hiding in the trees from predators. And if you want to know about herbivores, is they've 4 stomachs, and the reason why is they've one main ruminant, which is the big stomach, because they'd run out into the basically where they'd be seen into the glade. And they'd hoover up as much grass as they can, and then they'd hide back in the trees again and kind of keep away. And that's how ecosystems kind of functioned. That's how it was. And trees evolved with animals walking through them and smashing them down and knocking down the unhealthy ones and stimulating new growth and getting new, seedlings up and all this. And that's how the world was.
And is there a thing? I mean, again, I'm not speaking from any kind of real experience here, but is there something about wild animals versus livestock, this difference, this kind of, I guess it's this scale thing again, because there's those figures that get put around about the amount of we've sort of depleted kind of the biomass or on this planet of wild animals has been diminished to something absurdly tiny in the last whatever it is couple of 100 years, particularly the last few decades. But obviously then the number of livestock has gone through the roof. And I guess there's things so the questions I have always are we're seeing all these impacts on kind of water systems and rivers from runoff from livestock, and sort of the slurry and the nitrogen levels going up, and rivers kind of dying and stuff.
Totally.
And so how do we, I guess, I know these are big questions, but I guess that's the thing. So for me, it's my understanding is there is no, we need diversity of farming approaches, different approaches for different landscapes and different regions. But how do we sort of, in your view, do we meet this kind of the scale of the kind of industrial ag system that we're sort of, that's teetering, I guess, that we're sort of in this moment, aren't we, where we've sort of taken for granted, all these very, very cheap meats and these animals that are being produced in vast numbers. And what's your view on this? Does there have to be a big kind of reduction in our dependency on livestock and animals, do you think? Or
I want to be kind of controversial and say there certainly doesn't need to be a reduction in the number of animals. If the ecosystem can support the number of animals, ideally there'd be more, because that would mean the world is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But the industrial model of farming is, should be banned tomorrow. When the slurry tank arrived into Ireland, from what our fishing was in our fresh water and lakes, went from what it was before that down to 10%, like straight away. And that's it. Like there's no other real if, buts or maybes. That's probably what was the main cause. So, I am not an advocate for anything about the number of animals in the industrial model and the housing of animals. Oh my God, seeing animals inside for 6 months, a year, they didn't evolve standing on concrete, living inside, they never lived under a roof, under a tree maybe, but it's barbaric and feeding, herbivores grain, which they never evolved to eat, which is not good for them, which then is not good for us. Like there's so many things that are wrong. Like the list is very, very long, but done well, livestock moved around using the right genetics. Like that's a huge thing. Like we're generally using genetics that are just all about yield and all about quantity. Whereas, if you use the genetics that are suited to the landscape, suited to the weather, the soil type, that will thrive on those grasses, and there's no inputs, no housing, you'll get the number. Whatever the number is that the land can hold, that's the number. It's not about pushing those numbers to the maximum, and if you can't do it on your land, you're importing feed from Brazil and, this kind of crazy stuff that's just, completely out of whack and very unhealthy for the soil, the animals, and humans. So that has to be finished. But done well, like Alan Savory has a thing where it's like, show me a way to, like desertification is a man-made thing. It's not natural for deserts to exist. The world thrived, all over the globe once upon a time. And his thing is, show me a way to stop desertification. There's no technology that can stop desertification, but animals can. Now, you can say trees can, and trees are great, and they should be integrated. But you can straight away, if you bring animals into a desert, now you have to bring in feed, like hay or something. But if you bring them in there and they stay there for 24 hours in a spot and then you move them, the next time you come back, it might be 6 months or a year, life will be there because they bring life. Their footprints, their urine, their dung is life, and they have that ability to do that. There's no technology that can do that, and we have to respect the animals and use them correctly and see how they can repair the world that they once created, and stop abusing them and monetizing them and controlling them, and making, like, there's crazy stuff obviously going on in every food system, but it's the industrialization of it. It's horrific. Like it really is.
What have you? I mean, when you started, I remember. Well, because you went into like box schemes here, right? Is that right? And
CSA is what we call it,
right? Okay,
because it's a slightly different model, but
whereas people are sort of investing to support the system through kind of, so they pay up, subscribe, or is that how it kind of works?
That's
right?
it. Yeah. So we'd have a box a week, trying to do as many weeks as you can. So we used to do, in the end, about 9 months. And it's a lovely system. The issue with it is, and we were chatting about this earlier, is the number of people that want a CSA box is quite small. If you're looking at the population of an area, if it's 5%, I don't know. Like it's a certain type of person that wants a box. So when you build your whole system supplying to those customers, you're not really open to your average customer. So I've kind of gravitated more back to more traditional markets, and we have a farm shop because there's no commitment. People don't like the commitment. It's kind of scary. We make them up a box. They don't get to choose what's in the box. Most people don't eat half the things you want to put in there, so they don't like it. That's a certain type of person that likes that relationship. So at least at the farm, farmers market, they can come up, have a conversation. You can go, oh, you want to try this?
Yeah.
It's more kind of interesting and sociable, and I kind of like that more so than I'd still do the boxes, and people who like them, it's brilliant, and they're willing to support us, and I love that. But I want it to be more inclusive. I want the average person who might just be walking past, give it a go. And if you're putting all your eggs into one basket
to one box.
you're not capable then of being out and about and other things. So
it's tricky though, isn't it? Because I guess there's like you say, I mean, you mentioned maybe it's also size of population, and like box schemes can maybe need bigger populations for them to sort of.
Yeah, well, then, like basically the kind of regenerative food or organic food, kind of local food systems, they only attract a niche type of person. So, you know, if I was living, like, there's some really great market gardeners out there that are just killing it, like doing so well. But then you look and they live, you know, beside 5 million people. So if I live beside 5 million people and I could sell all the salad I can grow, geez, it'd be happy days.
Yeah.
I'd just be harvesting and delivering. But we have to like come up with all sorts of ideas, how to shift a little bit more of this and a little bit of that. And you know, you can start driving, but the last thing I want to be is a delivery person. Yeah. So we try and do it all in a very close, vicinity. And so then what happens is, so we've kind of been doing veg for years now. So it's another reason why the mixed farm is a good idea, because there's only so much veg locally people want of this kind of type of veg. So then, you stack up as many enterprises as you have time to do. So the eggs is our new one now, and that goes obviously hand in hand very well. And then we have meat now with our beef and lamb. And it's just nice to have other things to the same customers, the same niche people that, you know, already were getting the veg.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess there's the... have you sensed or seen, as you know, the time you've been doing this, are diets shifting? Are people more open to, you know, I guess are people understanding the sort of complexity of food, and also like the need probably to become more open to other varieties of vegetable or other things that are actually, you know, make sense to be grown here. Do you sense any change, or do you sense people are still quite locked in?
No, I'd hate to be negative, but I wouldn't say there's any radical change in our dietary choices as a society yet. I think people are waking up in general. Like in general, people, like the amount of people who want to move to this area, to the countryside, kind of homesteading, that kind of stuff is definitely starting more. But overall, eating habits, you know, as long as we can convenience shop, I think people will still use convenience shopping. It's just, until it's not there, it's just very hard not to use it. It's very simple. The car park's there on the way home and they have everything, and it works. Like, it was very funny with COVID and the first lockdown we had here. Like, it was phenomenal. It was March, I think, and there's not much in the garden at that time of year. And people weren't allowed to drive more than 5k. And everyone was freaking out, so they didn't want to go into supermarkets that much. Yeah. There was queues at the gate, like queues at the gate in the morning.
Had
like,
that ever happened before?
Never. Yeah. Like, and like there's like, you know, 5-6 people waiting and everyone taking their turn, and I was like, wow, you know, I was like, hopefully this goes on for a while. And we, you know, and it did, you know, it went on for probably a good 6 weeks like that, where it was really hysterical and everyone was, you know, coming every day, and they were so grateful, and they were just like, thank you so much, it's veg, and like, and they had time to cook because they're off work, and it was just this amazing time, and everyone was talking about eating well, and then literally the day things were opened up, they were gone, and that was it. We didn't see them anymore, and we're like, oh, that was a bit sad. Yeah, you know, like a percentage did keep coming, and you know, and they did kind of changed maybe a little bit, but most people, they said, and I'd meet them maybe in town or on the street and say, oh, that time was amazing, oh, I loved coming up to the shop, oh, I loved getting the veg, it was so good. I'm like, we're still there. We didn't go anywhere. And
so what's going on there, you think? The convenience thing.
It just sells. And people are time, you know, we're time sensitive, we don't have that much time, so then, or whatever, we think we don't have that much time, and then people want to do it the quickest way possible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Because like the lack of time is, when we look at all these issues that we're sort of facing into, the busier we are, the more
impact we tend to make in terms of our footprints, right? Because buying, you know, whatever, not being able to cook, not being able to grow, not being able to fix anything, it's all we're paying out, you know, and we're buying stuff, and it's this crazy tension. Yeah, like you said, we saw a glimpse of it in that first lockdown. I think people saw it, you know, there was this kind of glimpse of a different way.
And the conversations were amazing. I was like, oh, this could be it. Like they could have tweaked it. Yeah, they're like, you know, having the time to cook with your kids, and everyone's just, you know, everyone's calmer and happier, and we're going for a walk after dinner. And I was like, this could be it. They might have just, but then people have the bills, you know, people have bought into the house and this, and then they need to pay for it, and it quickly falls back, but then there's no doubt some other crisis is on the way, you know, be it a climate one or environmental one or whatever. Like, there's something on the way. So it's interesting to see, as soon as crisis happens, where people go. We go back to basics very quick. And was it the fall of the Roman Empire? Everyone left the city and went straight out onto the land and started growing again. It's kind of what happens, you know.
Well, this is, I mean, that's the, you know, we won't get into this because it would be unfair, because I've barely started George Monbiot's new book, but it does. You know, I saw him talk down in Bath a couple of weeks back, but the thing he opens with is he talks about this you know, modern food system that's been created over, you know, decades, whatever, that it's a very complex system. He just talks about complex systems generally, that we, in our sort of industrial mindsets, we're not great with understanding complexity. We're very good at specialisms and stuff. And so he talks about, he uses that example of, you know, the financial crash in whenever it was it 2008 or was it 2008? I can't even remember. 2008, wasn't it? Yeah. But he talks about that, you know, this complex system, and you start to see these signals. There were these early signals that that this system will give you that let you know something is, you know, we're on the verge of something quite seismic. Yeah. And he talks about, and I say I haven't got into depth, but broadly speaking, he's suggesting we're in a similar state with food, that it's this massively complex system that is now showing signals that it could be about to, you know, to collapse. And again, I said I haven't got into it, but I guess I was just wanting to sort of explore, like, what, you know, because you talked about COVID pandemic, people coming up here. How, in your view, how resilient, like, let's take where you are here in Ireland, how resilient do you think folks are when it comes to food? How are we when it comes to food? What would happen, for example, if supply chains started to dry up quite quickly?
Yeah, there'd definitely be a bit of a panic, and I think George is completely right to say that those warning signs are flashing quite loud and clear now. And we know, like, the growth illusion, kind of endless growth idea, and thinking you can ship things from China, you know, for your car, you know, click a button and it just arrives. Like, you know, that's all very fast-paced new stuff that we've never had before. And to build your whole food system on such a kind of a, you know, what do they call it? The 3 days, like, everything is just in time model. Like, Jesus, what a fragile way to feed the world. Like, and it's only Western world now we're worried about here. You know, the third world are still down on their hands and knees, you know, growing like they always have. So, you know, they're not worried as much now. They're getting screwed on those other ways with climate and different things. But yeah, our just-in-time model, it's kind of ludicrous. To not have your food sorted in your backyard doesn't really make any sense. As a government, should be the number one priority, and as communities, that we just have the basics in order. I think it's 5% of farmers in Ireland actually feed into the Irish population, and like 95% of them is export. So it's not a great system, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's what that whole idea of this import-export model, and you say in some countries have, you know, probably out, you know, now have just gone pure, everything is on import, right? Or, you know, either they're producing and exporting everything, or they're producing very little and importing everything, which is just such a mad, when you think about it, you know, food, it's like the essential.
Yeah, just air, water, then food.
Yeah.
That's what I always say is, we should be worried at the air because you can't last that long without that one.
Yeah.
And then water, which is we only have the same water that goes round and round.
Yeah.
And every time you pollute it, it's a bit less that we can drink. That should be the next top priority that everyone is concerned about. And then food. Like food's actually down a little bit. And then get your food right before you worry about electric cars or your broadband or any of these things that we seem to put a lot of energy into. It's like we haven't got the basics right, guys. And it's now, to be positive, I think Ireland is in a very, very positive situation. We have only 5 million people on a pretty big island with
a lot of cows. I noticed.
A lot of land is the thing. We have a lot of lands per population. So and water, it was a huge thing that we have. But still, we're up shit creek. Like, we don't have farmers. We have people who drive machinery. We don't have people who know soil and the land. And, we're very used to filling a diesel tank. And now it's getting very expensive. Like, it is a very scary place to be for those kind of industrial farmers. And I feel for them. Like, I really do. I think they're in a shit place because it's not going to get any easier. Like, nothing's going to get easier in that model. That model is only going to start cracking harder. And our job, I think, as people who are, interested in this, is just trying to get the models that will work up and running. So then when people are ready or have to change, it's easier for them to change. And then we can help each other along. And it's not some like, haha, I told you so. It's like, right, we can, peer to peer get each other through this, because it's very important that we do.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? And how, because you've always, because of your, your own story and your story into farming from surfing, you've always attracted a lot of interest in what you do and how you've been going about it. What are you like, on this now with the current, the position we're in now here in Ireland, other farmers? What's happening? Are you really sensing there's shifts going on? How are people kind of connecting with you now, and what's going on in terms of like what you've got going on here? But how is that sort of, what's the web that's being created around this now in Ireland? And
firstly, I would say I'm the number one beginner on this journey. I'm really starting from the bottom, and I'm just learning as I go. But I'm just very interested and passionate and want to learn. So I'm willing to try anything. So that kind of gives me a bit more flexibility. Whereas a lot of people, from a conventional background, it's hard to change something you've been pushing hard. And most farms are on a bigger scale than us, so they've a lot more at stake if they change. But I would say
it's generational as well, I guess.
Yeah, and is Daddy going to let me do it? That's a very big thing in handing down farms here. But the thing about industrial kind of model, conventional farmers is they're hard workers. They're seriously hard workers. They also know how to get shit done. So if they decide to change, they can do radical change, and overnight. They're not afraid to work. That's the thing. People give industrial farmers a hard time, and in ways rightly so. But I wouldn't say it's their doing. It's from the system.
Yeah, you inherit this stuff, don't you?
Feeding them technology and telling them life will be easier if you use this fertilizer or this spray. But anyway, we all had decisions to make. But they're hard-ass workers. They get up every day, 7 days a week, more than anyone in a 9 to 5. They will, they'll outdo you in any hard day's work. So if they clock onto this, and they are, they can move mountains comparatively to me, because I've a small farm and I'm only getting into this. They've got all the tools at their disposal, and they're ready to go. It's just a change of philosophy, really. Yeah. It's just a very slight shift.
And is that the cost now that's really driving this? Is we hear a lot about soil and the state of soil, and decades of industrial agriculture and all of that. What's your sense of what you're learning or sensing from other farmers? What's driving this or starting this shift, if you like?
The big thing that's going to change things is just the costs.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the cost. Like, the land could be getting worse and worse, which it is. But as long as people can still get in their tractor and still spray extra fertilizer to get things to grow, they'll keep doing it. But now when it's twice the price to fill the tractor and twice the price to spray the fertilizer, yeah, that just is a pretty big wake-up call that I don't want to waste my money on this stuff. So that's money does lead people into different directions. But like I'm meeting dairy farmers, like big dairy farmers now that have clocked it, like, and they see it. They see what a scam that they've been sold. How it's all about a middleman running the show who's convincing them of a technology and then selling them the technology and then all the inputs to use in the technology, and then they're kind of addicts and they're hooked and they've kind of seen it. And no, I wouldn't say it's a huge percentage, but there is people, and as they transition and start to manage their soil and build the soil up and start, the big one is if they can have the same yields or even similar yields to the farmer next door, but then they've no inputs, like, every farmer will be watching them. But there just needs to be a bit more of once that tipping point happens of enough of that, there is no going back now. Like, the cat is out of the bag with where it's going, and I think it's only a matter of time. And it's a very exciting time. It really is. Like, it's a lot more positive than negative farming, I would say, right now. Like, the majority of industrial agriculture, it's still fully functioning and whatever, but that's horrendous. But the change is at play. Like, it's happening, and that is very positive. That's never been, even when I started 8 years ago, that wasn't happening. I didn't see those changes then as I do now. So another 10 years from now, it's going to snowball, I would say.
I remember, I think when I last came up here, but maybe it was before, we were talking a bit about climate and the experience of climate change and the sort of destabilizing of weather patterns. And I remember you saying at the time how much you were witnessing shifts yourself. Can we speak a little bit to that? Like, are you noticing? Are you seeing there's more predictability? Is it chaotic? What's going on from what you see and experience every day?
To be honest, I kind of got to a place where, like, it's like, it's going to be bad weather tomorrow, and I can give out about it, but it is what it is. Like, we got to kind of work with it. And we can say we're changing the climate, or we could say we're not. But whatever happens, extreme things will happen with the weather. And there's no doubt about that. We'll have extreme heat and we'll have extreme floods. And the only thing that we can do is buffer it. It's trying to buffer the extremities. If you can have your soil armored up with enough organic matter that it can hold moisture when it's dry and hold the moisture when it's wet and have good strong roots, then you're resilient. And that's the job as a farmer, to be buffering up for any extreme thing that comes, because industrial agriculture is very efficient and it's all designed around everything working and everything going to plan and having these temperatures and everything working. But if you have an extreme weather event, climate change or not, it leaves you in a fragile space. And that's the big thing. That's the whole thing. Regenerative agriculture is about building soil, storing carbon, building organic matter, whatever way you want to call it. And by doing that, you're basically creating like a kind of a buffer between when it's dry, your neighbor who's not storing or not layering down carbon, his land will dry out very quickly and yours won't. And yours will still be growing grass and his won't. And that's pretty night and day. And there's lots of examples of that across the world. And that's all we can do. But the funny thing is, as you're doing that, you're storing carbon and growing grass, and as you're growing grass, then you've got more seed heads and flowers, and then more insects and more biodiversity. So it's like it's either all going up or all going down.
Yeah.
And that's all, we're a part of. And if everyone's all a part of the going up, like, nature will respond so well, so quickly. Like, it's phenomenal how much it wants to heal if we just allow it and start, steering it in that direction. So I actually don't worry about the climate change thing anymore as much maybe as I used to, because all we can do is the step in front of us, which needs to be this kind of regenerative ag, kind of stuff, and that will help in the big picture, and that's all we can actually do. Like,
so sort of focus on life, right? It's like bringing that life back.
Like, when you do something positive and you see a positive result, the world just got a little bit better, and that's going to help the climate change. If it is, going out of control, that's going to help, whatever that is. So
So I know, like, I think the last time I was here, you've been exploring lots of different models. You've had like volunteering models. You've got interning models now, right? That's right. And I know, even from what I see, where I'm in Bath and the younger farmers, it feels like there is something really bubbling up. Like, it feels like there is more, particularly, younger folks wanting to come into farming. It feels like that's happening, or there's something happening in that space. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned about, or what you're seeing again with youngsters wanting to come onto the land, and also maybe what you've learned a bit about different models of how you actually work with others, how you build,
Yeah, I suppose after we're kind of learning about building soil, we really got to try and help other people do it, because, you're not going to manage the whole country yourself. So that's the next part of what gets me motivated, is how do we get more of this happening? And if people want to get into this, how do we get them off on the right foot? Because it's not an easy occupation to get into. Like, if you're trying to become a farmer, and unless you're inheriting land or you have millions in your back pocket, it's a very expensive occupation to start, between buying land, infrastructure, and then you're going to do it for 10, 15 years just to learn the trade. And then you'll have if you're buying in with very little money, you're going to have huge debts. You will virtually never get paid. So it's not like the occupation you'd be, queuing up for in theory. But people want to do it because people feel the importance of this. And I think those people need support. Like, those people, if we can just help them along in that journey of getting off their feet, like, doing every bit of it, learning to be a farmer, buying the assets, starting a brand, selling direct, being, a marketer, a salesperson, accountant, all these things. It's such an overwhelming task to get into. Like, I wouldn't recommend it at all. But I hope people do it, because it's very, very important that we do. And the only way you can make any money at it at all is if you sell direct, which is way more work. So I don't know, if we can help these people get off on the right foot. And my thing is this internship that I do now, because I've done volunteering. I suppose I kind of originally wanted to get everyone into it and wanted everyone to learn and have, everyone here, but actually you can't help everyone at once.
Well, you saw that. I remember you also, again, Robbie, I remember that you saw the sort of healing potential of people working together, or people getting their hands in the soil together as well, right?
Totally. You want to bring people back to the land. Like, as a Western culture, there's never been so few people on the land, and then we're depressed, and there's, lack of connection to food and all that. So I just wanted as many people to be here. And we did. We had a huge amount of volunteer days here, and it was an amazing time and really, really great to do. But I would say, I don't know, 95, 98% of those people will never be farmers, which is fine, and that's totally normal. But I want to have more farmers. Like, I want to have people who, are my up and coming, people that I can talk with and trade notes with and learn from, and watch them regenerate 100 acres over there. And that's what we need. Like, we need a whole wave of new people managing land well, and you ain't going to do that overnight. So we have a 6-month internship for the April to October, so the full growing season. And they don't work, there's a woofing network.
That's right.
Which a lot of people would kind of use, and I'm not sure, it's like 4 hours a day or something work you get for food and board. But the interns work 10 hours or even 11 hours. And, you know, they start at 5:30 and they take on responsibility. I get them to do the markets. You know, they're managing livestock. I go away and make sure, you know, they on purpose so they can mind the place.
Yeah.
Just so they
See those cows? They're all yours.
well, just make sure if you start something next year and you've never had this responsibility, it's a bit of a deep end.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But if we kind of have it set up and they can just learn it, it's a huge step to get going. And then I do an afternoon a week classroom time where we go through each enterprise, you know, what it would take, you know, to cost to set it up, and looking at what kind of resource base they may have. And I'm only taking on interns who are looking to become farmers. So they either have land or looking to get into farming for sure. And that way we can run through their ideas and this kind of stuff, because they need it. Like we all need it. I needed it. I still need it. And so it's cool, and you're investing in them, and then, you know, afterwards we're here as, you know, they can ring me anytime, and hopefully we can help them on their journey afterwards. And that's what I see is what we need more of. Is like, we don't need, no offense to the educational system, but we don't need degrees and PhDs. We need hands-on, real-life experience. Like, you can learn farming inside out. You can even be taught it, how to do it. But then to do it in the real world and run a business and it actually work, and all the nuances of a community and what people want, like, you can do the numbers on how to make money out of farming, and you can say, I could make money out of that, but can you sell it, you know? And how far are you going to have to drive for that, those numbers? You got to figure all that stuff out. And then the big one you got to decide is what quality of life you want. Because you can make money out of farming, but you mightn't have a life because of it. So if you still want to have enough time with your family and you don't want to drive too much, then you got to figure out what enterprises they are. And it's it's a complex thing, you know, it really is.
And you're like, I mean, I say, you know, you live on this land. You're bringing up your young family on this land. You are totally immersed in this place, aren't you? And how does that, you know, that's the route you've chosen. What's your sense from other farmers, and is this seen as the way to do it, or, you know, I'm curious about, like, you know, because it's you have this, I guess it's non-stop for you. Yeah. Is that the normal for? Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest hard one you're trying to show to interns is, like, if you don't like this, and this is the 6 months in the nice time of the year, you know, we're talking summer months here where everything is rosy. You know, the hardest thing in farming is getting through the winter. Like, you know, getting through the winter historically is a scary time, you know, making it through a winter. Animals, you know, feeding them, feeding yourselves. So you're teaching them, like, it's a 365 job. You don't really get any pat on the back for it. There'll be numerous setbacks, numerous challenges. You'll mess up, animals will die, you know, crops will fail, something will go wrong, your tunnel will blow away, and you have to get up in the morning and deal with it. And again, and then the weather will be shit, and, you know, and you won't really get paid for it. So you're like, there's very...
So come on, folks,
So that is like the reality, and it's tough. But on the exact... So it's like a double side of it's a coin. Like, on one side, it's kind of hell, and you could say, I don't call it hell, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
And on the other side is you're in nature. You're around animals. You're watching, you know, trees grow. You're listening to the birds. You're feeding your community. You're physically fit. You know, you feel like you're doing something worthwhile. There's purpose to everything you do. You know, you can watch land get better year on year. You're watching your healthy animals. You know, you're watching baby animals born. Like, it's a dream. It's like the dream come true. It's like what everyone would love, to live out in the country and have your own food, the best diet you could ever ask for, people appreciating what you do. Like, the list goes on and on. Yeah. So it's like, it's both. It's exactly both at all times, and the positives have to be more important to you than the negatives, and then you can overcome the negatives. But yeah, you gotta, there is no real holiday in it, and that's tough. It's a really tough thing. But the big one then, I think, once you get into farming for a few years, if you meet, proper farmers who are at it a long time, they wouldn't be able to explain it, but they don't want to leave. They don't want to go anywhere. Like, they have no interest in going on a holiday. It's funny that farmers are getting the big rap about climate change and different things. You won't see the farmers on a flight to Barbados. Like, you won't see them sunning themselves down in Spain. Like, they don't leave their farm, and they're not looking for a holiday, and they work every day of the week, and they care a lot about where they are. Yeah, they've been misled in different ways, but it's like, when you get that kind of a part of a place, it's not about you. It's not about me and my time off and what I make and how much I have, or any of these things. It's like that tree growing over there, and that cow eating that grass, and that salad in the tunnel. You're just one of them. You're just in that ecosystem, and you're just a part of it. And you got your job, and they've got their job, and your job is kind of important, so you better not mess up for them. And you kind of just, it's all in your head, and you're just a part of it. And it's kind of, yeah, it's a beautiful feeling. It's a feeling you can't put a price on and really make anyone understand until they feel it and experience it. And that's the priceless bit.
And you've got that just as part of the van up on the hill there, and obviously you've got the view out across to Lahinch and the ocean. And how's that for you? Are you still getting in the water often, or how does that work for you? But seeing it is, it's stunning. I imagine it must, because that's that other part of you, and having that sight of it feels really special.
No, it's definitely why we live here, because practically farming wise, you wouldn't live on the top of a hill near the sea. Like, and I could have settled in Mayo, where my family are from, and it would have been easier and better land, but I grew up there, and I hated how much we drove to the sea. So I was like, if I'm going to farm, I want to be near the sea, because it is special. And just to be 10 minutes and jumping in the sea with the kids at the end of a day is, it's a great way for farmers to unwind. And it doesn't have to be the sea, but something you need to, because you basically carry things as a farmer all day long from one place to another. So the whole occupation is quite heavy. You're always kind of like weighed down with either physical stuff or just thinking about stuff and what you're going to do next. So then to go into the sea and float is like a really good offset. So wintertime's good. I've got less on, and I can surf a good bit more. We do actually take a month off in January and have someone mind the place and actually surf. It's the 1 month where things are quite quiet. And then summer, it's a long day, so you can get in at the end of the day, but it's just really just a family fun affair. Like, I done that mad surfing obsession, and it was an amazing time, but it was definitely great memories, but I'm not obsessed anymore, which is lovely. I go to the sea, and it's fun and it's pleasurable, and I'm not chasing anything. It's a really nice experience. Whereas before, it was like I was pushing it in the surfing world, and that was very exciting, but it was kind of intense as well. Where now it's, if I get to the sea, I'm delighted. That's all I need now.
Yeah, love it. So listen, just one thing I'm really interested in conversation I'm having with people at the moment is this kind of like how we imagine the future, how we sort of think about, how we're using our imagination in the work that we're doing. And like, when you sort of think about what you're trying to do here, and you're training others up now and networking out to more farmers, and what is the future you imagine? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Okay, we need another hour, I think.
By the way, we're sitting in the dark, and it's getting late.
Yeah. But yeah, I can yatter on for a little bit about the, that's what keeps me going. So we're trying to build a training center at the moment. We have the planning permission. I got a small grant. I'm trying to find more money to build a training center for these interns, then to run, you know, specific courses on certain, you know, enterprises or whatever, and people can use the space. So that's one aspect that I'm trying to do in the kind of medium term. I personally am like, I want to be a land grabber. I want to acquire more land because I don't like it seen conventionally farmed and sprayed and whatever. So the more land I can acquire, which probably won't be much, but I aspire to, because then I can manage it and see it, you know, healthy. And I'd love that. And then I have this kind of dream of, so you have your interns, and then, you know, you maybe have a really great intern who becomes staff the next year, and they be staff for a couple of years. And then you could either lease them a piece of land, or they could just have their own enterprise, or find, you know, I have a network of people I know, and if I find someone who's retiring and wants a good farmer, I could get a staff member their own farm, you know, and this kind of stuff. And the bigger picture would be like, if you could create a network where the market was created for this new farmer, that the farmer could just farm, like that's the fun stuff, and that's what they should be focusing on. And they could just sell their stuff into, you know, I don't want to say like a franchise kind of Moy Hill, but some way that you could link up for them and even help them, or you have someone who can do their marketing for whatever, different things.
Yeah.
But
They can just focus on...
I think that puts off a lot of young people, the idea that they have to run a business.
Yeah.
Now, they should learn some skills around finances, but not having to waste time doing things that aren't basically building soil.
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of different ways I'd love it to go. And hopefully it would just keep that kind of domino effect of a few more interns, and they start, and then ideally those interns then will have their own interns, you know, and it'll go on like that.
And do you see, that's beautiful. Do you see the one of the things I see or hear with is land access, right? Is problematic, and obviously then, you know, trying to buy land, and you know, and you've been through all of that. But do you see? And I guess again, it's just complex, because I imagine there are farmers who've spent their lives, you know, and you know, working crazily to sustain these farms, and I'm getting a sense that they can be offered, you know, decent money potentially now for land and stuff. How do we deal with that tension of, like, you know, making land more accessible to more younger farmers, for example? But you know, how do you see that panning out? Do you sense some of the older farmers are interested in the legacy of these things now, and how to get more people on? Or is there, because I'm imagining people are getting offered money for farms as well, that it's just you can't say no to? Or we're hearing stories in England about you know, businesses, big companies, corporations buying up land now for like carbon sequestration, you know, just basically to sort of tick boxes on numbers effectively. And how do you see that, the whole land access thing here?
Yeah, it is a very complex thing, and we're a traumatized nation. We're around, you know, land and historically, and I think that really is still playing out, like in this country with farmers, and why we won't let go of land easily.
Tell us a bit about that, just for folks.
Well, like the most recent one would be our famine, like, which was never actually a famine. It was just, there was when, unfortunately, the English were trying to wipe us out and starved us for 3 years. And no one really knows that that's actually what happened. Like, there was over half the English army was in Ireland for 3 years, which is, you know, a huge amount of people taking the food from Ireland to the UK, and it was then sold in the history books as the famine.
That's right.
And the
potato famine.
Yeah,
right.
the poor Irish with their potato, and we're made to think we're fools, and you know that we couldn't grow anything else but potatoes. And so there's a lot of trauma there, and it's like it was basically genocide, and it was never acknowledged like that, and we're still to this day not over it. I think there's huge trauma in the Irish psyche. Like, there should be, you know, basic therapy for millions of people and their families to kind of get over how the land didn't fail them, you know, and it wasn't them being poor Irish, peasants or anything. And yeah, just trying to heal it and see how we can navigate what's best for the land. And we also had our land taken off us for a very long time. So we got our land back. We don't want to let it go, and they don't want it to leave the family name, and that's all very poignant kind of, emotive stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's suicides all the time. There was a family there, the brother. So, your classic is the farm's going to get handed down to one of the brothers, and then mightn't go so well. There's feuding. So one of the brothers shot the other brother and the dad and himself this year over land. And like, that's not the first time.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, like that's where we're at with land. And so you can see why they're not handing over to some young upcoming.
Yeah, I get it.
So what needs to happen, I see, is we need to have these so ideally we're going to have the next generation of farmers who are inheriting land doing these internships or just learning themselves, and that's it, and it's easier that way. But it's very hard for a conventional farmer's son or daughter to change, because they're basically saying they're wrong. They're saying everything they've been doing up to now could be wrong, and that's very difficult. So it's easier for a new entrant who doesn't have the attachment to what dad did to see, oh yeah, that could be done better, and they can learn it. So then when you have these interns who are trained up and you get them access to land, whoever it might be, which would be great, you've then got some case studies to show farmers, look, it can work, and you need to have really clear agreements and contracts. There's an organization in France that's really good at that. I don't know the name, but they do this mediation over a 3-year period where they give the new entrants, internships for 2 years, and then 1 year with the original farmer where they hand over the farm and teach them all about the farm. And it's really well done, but it's all done through immediate, someone in the middle, and there's no complications and contracts, and they don't even have to own the land, the new entrant. They could just have a lifetime lease. So they have access to the land in their lifetime, but the farm can stay in the family's name. And so there's really good models out there. We're just, we haven't explored them. We haven't tried them in this country. So we need the case study to show the farmer who's thinking about retiring and doesn't have someone who wants to take it, how it can be done. But that's a part of, so I'm involved in a farming organization called Talamh Beo, which is a link to La Via Campesina, which is a worldwide peasant farmer movement. And so Talamh Beo will be working on this kind of stuff. Like that's what one of the things we're trying to get is this kind of structure, like, because it's a big deal trying to, hand over land. And like, because if you handed land over to someone and they mess it up, like, oh my God, like the reputation in the community, if you've given your land to these people who've now trashed it or whatever went wrong, like, so it has to be done very, carefully. That's very important, I think.
So that sounds like a biggie. Just, a couple of last things that would be curious to get your sense on. So what's, thinking about all of this, like what's exciting you the most about this moment in time, like with everything that's going on? What's really sort of...
Well, the coolest thing about regenerative farming, like that's the term I like to use.
Yeah.
There's biological farming, there's loads of different words, but it basically is, it doesn't cost anything. We don't need a new tractor, we don't need a shed, we don't need any technology. It's just a different management system. There might be little inputs of different ideas here and there, but realistically it's just a way of managing things and thinking differently. And what do they say is turnover is vanity and profit is sanity. Like if we can see how we can just still make the profit is the same, like dairy farmers are making huge money, but then they've huge overheads. And if we can get rid of inputs, like inputs are just ridiculous, like needing to have huge tractors, needing to have all the fertilizer, need to have all the grain and all this stuff. If we can manage farms without these inputs, the farmer's back in control, and they don't need, to worry about, basically very much then. They just need to manage what they have in front of them. And that's very exciting. And like it's basically at our fingertips. Like tomorrow, every farmer could say no to the fertilizer coming in the drive and learn from someone who's already done it. And all of a sudden, the world's a different place. And that's very exciting. And there's I think there's some facts on, like, a third of the world is grassland. And currently, like, a lot of the world's grassland gets burned at the end of the season if it wasn't grazed properly. So you think about all the carbon that's released by doing that, and it wasn't storing carbon, never mind releasing it. But if you tomorrow stored carbon through grassland, it would just cancel all CO2 emissions like overnight. And that's just using the exact same people, the exact same animals, just a different way of doing it. And that's pretty cool. Like, that's just like, there's no fancy, big.
It's a consciousness shift, really.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's a shift of perspective or perception almost.
And it's happening as well. That's the other thing. Like people want to look up stuff, like, there's some amazing farmers out there. The US is an amazing place where they have the worst agriculture in the world, and because of it, they have the best agriculture in the world because you get the extremes.
Yeah.
So there's Greg Judy is a cool guy I follow. Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin. There's a guy, the farm White Oak Pastures. There's some kind of bigger farms, and there's Colin Seiss in Australia. And then in Europe we've got like Richard Perkins, and there's loads, like, but they're doing it, like, they're genuinely doing it for some of them 30, 40 years, making huge shifts. Like, some of them were taking like degraded cropland that was worthless, and now it's like thriving ecosystems of like a lush grass, loads of wildlife, healthy animals, and it can be done, and that's very, very exciting. I just love to see more of that here in Ireland. That's what I'm kind of hoping to move along a little bit.
Yeah. And then on the flip of that, I guess, exactly, what's the stuff that's keeping you awake? Like, what's kind of alarming, in light of all this potential and possibility, but what's holding things back, or what's causing you concern?
There's a lot, like, I suppose, but I try not to dwell on it too much. But there's things like, the middlemen definitely hold a lot of the control at the moment, and they're going to keep, as things get harder for them, they're going to hold on tighter, and that's what we're in now. Like, we're in this time of they're really holding on to the control, and that's just a tough thing to witness. It's really it, and they don't help farmers at all. And there's like the regulatory stuff for farming, like, that is just barbaric. Like, the fact that we have to do all these crazy paperwork for good farming, like, so I'm going for organic standards, which I don't particularly need or anything, but I was convinced to do it anyway. And I have to pay for this, I have to do a course for this, I have to get inspected for this, probably loads of other things, like constant paperwork through the whole year. Everything has to be recorded to produce healthy food. Whereas a conventional farmer doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to pay. They're the ones spraying the chemicals.
That's the sign of the times, isn't it?
And
this stuff is like the good stuff.
Whereas I should be hopefully supported for what I'm trying to do, not coming out and like told, you need to fill this form out, and you need to. You're just like, this isn't really going to ever encourage people to get into this type of farming when you make it very difficult. So that's very hard to witness, and it's very hard to be innovative. That's a real thing. Like, any of the kind of cottage industry kind of stuff that would definitely start happening very quickly if it was allowed, but you need to have like, these HACCP kitchens just to make a jam. Like, it's just, that stuff is tough. It really stops people trying.
And
that
sort of quashes the...
you're either big or you get out kind of stuff. So that's hard to witness, but I don't think that's going to be around forever either.
Makes sense. So listen, this podcast is inspired by this idea of this planet being a living system, a bit like a spaceship, and it has an operating system. It's called nature, but it requires everyone to kind of understand that operating system, and to sort of be a part of it. So I have this thing we explore around, moving from this kind of passenger mentality to becoming crew on this spaceship Earth. And one thing I'm really interested in asking guests is, like, more and more listeners wanting to do things or wanting to get involved, wanting to participate. Knowing what you know about what you do and food, what would you suggest listeners, people that are interested, either maybe even growing, but maybe just in terms of the food that they're eating, or what would be a good mission to send people on, in your view, in these times when it comes to all of this?
It just depends on what level of the kind of ladder you're on. So from a very basic level, like, get down to the farmers market, wherever it is, even if it's half an hour away or whatever. Just go down there, support those people, ask them questions, ask them how they do things, and then, thank them for it. Maybe even give them a tip because they ain't driving a BMW, like, it's just these people, there's not that many of them, and they deserve to be supported. And if you care, then go and support them. And that's very simple. It's very easy. Research, learn stuff. Like those kind of people I was saying, like Joel Salatin and Greg Judy, like, look them up, learn about them, and listen to them, because they are way down the road of what I'm talking about. Like, they've been round the mill a few times, and they're, they're doing it like on a bigger scale. And it's very interesting just to listen and constantly be. Holistic management has a great kind of philosophy, and it basically says, when you go, you got to make a plan. Whatever you're going to do in the day, you have to make some sort of plan. So make your plan, make the best plan you can, but don't dwell on it. Make your plan, and then you just go out and assume you're going to be wrong. You're probably going to be wrong. Your plan is probably going to be crap, but that's okay. But just monitor the plan, see it go wrong, and learn from it, and monitor it, and then adjust it and try and make a new plan. So that's everything. So you're going to try and buy organic stuff, and you go into wherever, Tesco's or Aldi, and then observe it and see how you feel, taste it, and then try the farmers markets, organic, whatever, and just constantly just observe everything and assume I could be wrong about this. And it could be like, if I was a vegetarian and I was headstrong about being a vegetarian, and now I eat meat, and I'm willing to be wrong. Like, I'm willing to change, and it was an amazing journey for me to be on. And I think we're not very good at that in a Western society, and farmers especially. We don't like to admit that maybe me driving this huge tractor could be detrimental to the soil, and we don't like that. We want to just keep pushing the boat we're on. And if we could all just be humble enough to go, maybe I'm wrong, and open and listen to someone else's experiences, it's fascinating what you might pick up,
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fergal. It's been great to chat, and for hosting us here again, and it's been lovely to catch up and see. I mean, I've noticed, just to say, when I drove up, you can feel the place is growing. You know what I mean? You can really sort of sense it and feel the land, and it feels more alive.
Yeah.
So it's working.
Yeah, no, it's exciting times. I think it's lovely to have people to come back, over a few years here and there. And that's another thing gets me very excited, is just to imagine in 10 years and in 15 years. And yeah, so thanks for coming.
No, man. Well, I'm definitely having no more children, so it will definitely be me on my own probably next time. But no, thanks, dude, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks, Dan.
If you've appreciated listening to this podcast, would you consider sharing it with a friend, or leaving us a rating or review via your podcast provider? It helps more people to find us, and we'd be most grateful.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Fergal. Check out Moy Hill Farm, and as Fergal said, seek out your local producers, your local farmers, your regenerative farmers. They're popping up all over the place. They need our support. So and also highly recommend getting onto YouTube, searching for Fergal Smith, just to sort of see Fergal in action, like from a surfing perspective, because he's quite extraordinary, and it's worth spending a little bit of time watching Fergal out in the ocean. Quite extraordinary surfer. So on that, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. It means a lot. Do share this episode or others if you can. Help more people find us. A little podcast broadcasting from our little shed in our garden in Somerset. But more people are finding us. More people are really connecting with the stories and the conversations we're having. So we would be massively grateful if you could, share us on to other folks you think might enjoy these conversations. A lot more coming in 23, hopefully. Yeah, the universe will be behind us next year, doing whatever it wants to do. And also check out becomingcrew.com. Unlearning adventures to help us navigate mysterious times, the great unraveling which we are living through. These are something I've been gestating for several years, prototyping for several years, which are learning experiences with others in community, in crew, where we can create the space to explore our most alive questions, where we can connect deeply to our uncomfort, vulnerability and pain for what is going on around us, where we can move through that, where we can let go of old stories and ideas that no longer serve us, and where we have the support for us to deepen our interdependence with life itself, deepen our connection with the more than human world, deepen our connection with ourselves, connect more deeply to our own unique gifts of which we're being called to offer into the world now, to take part in a collective healing, and to connect and learn with others around us, with crews, so we're not alone in this journey of change which we're being called to take part in. So, like the guests on the podcast, who I believe all are operating around this kind of metaphor of crew on Spaceship Earth, all participating in bringing life back, participating in this living system, who are seeing the world as alive, complex, interconnected. How can we move from this kind of more sort of passive, passenger-like culture, which has been shaped over the last few decades, this culture of modernity which has kind of disconnected us from life itself, and how do we step into the crew mentality where we are in service, we are serving life itself, we are participating through our work and lives in the healing of the whole and bringing life back to the whole system. What is our role in that? What are we here to do? This is what we're trying to explore through these unlearning adventures. So becomingcrew.com, go and check it out. You can have a look. You can also then just link directly to myself or to Eva and Mark and have a call with us to talk through where you're at and what experience might be right for you. So very exciting, loads more to come, including there's a podcast coming soon which will dig deep into this, but do check it out. We're pretty excited. Gonna play out with a tune because, just because. It's a track from Bicep, who I actually went to see a couple of weeks ago at Alexandra Palace in London. Absolutely awesome night, jumping around in a big sort of warehouse vibe, which is just what I needed, just the medicine I was looking for. This is a track called Waterfall. Hailing from Belfast, they've just released this year their second album, Isles, which is an absolute belter, well worth checking out. Until next time, look after yourself out there and those around you, and of course our more than human family. Peace out.